My name is Elise, and I used to believe that if you buried something deep enough, guilt, desire, regret, it would eventually dissolve. I thought you could layer enough good decisions over a bad one and somehow balance the scale. But secrets don't die in silence. They wait. And mine surfaced during what should have been a quiet Sunday lunch at my mother's house in Savannah. The table was crowded with family: my mother, my brother Nate and his wife, my younger sister Marissa, and of course Andrew, my husband of 10 years. My mother had made pot roast and sweet tea, the kind of meal she uses to stitch us all back together when life pulls us in different directions. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon. The windows were cracked open just enough to let in the cicadas. Then Nate stood up, holding a glass of champagne someone had poured without me noticing. He smiled, raised it high, and said, "To Elise and Andrew, 10 years. That's rare these days. You two give the rest of us hope." Everyone clapped. Smiles stretched across familiar faces. Except for Marissa. She didn't clap. She didn't lift her glass. She stared at the cloth napkin in her lap like she was reading something written only for her. Her silence was so sharp it sliced right through the warmth of the room, and in that moment I knew, she knew, about Jesse, about me, about the 6 months I'd spent living a lie. If you're still here, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not the only one who's ever sat at a family table smiling through a secret that could destroy everything. It had started like so many things do, not with fire, but with quiet. I ran into Jesse at a work conference in Atlanta. He was staying at the same hotel. We hadn't seen each other since college, but he looked the same, confident, thoughtful, that kind of unresolved charm that made you lean in without realizing it. We had drinks in the hotel bar. We talked for hours. Then we didn't say goodbye. That night turned into another weekend, then monthly meetups, then excuses and detours and lies I told so fluidly I started believing them myself. Jesse was separated, not divorced. I clung to that detail like it made me less wrong. Back home, Andrew was steady, loving, predictable in the best way. He noticed when I was tired. He brought me my favorite wine when I didn't ask. He never once suspected. We still laughed together, still watched old movies under a blanket on the couch. But there was a distance between us I had stopped trying to cross. And when Jesse showed up, I didn't resist. I told myself it was loneliness, that I needed to feel something new to remember who I was, that it wasn't about love. It was about breath, about escape. But I knew better, even then. And now, Marissa was looking through me like a window. We'd once been close, sisters who shared clothes and secrets and late-night whispers about boys and dreams. But somewhere along the way, she'd changed. Or I had. Maybe both. Her divorce had hardened her. Or maybe it had simply made her more honest. Either way, she was no longer someone I could lie to. After lunch, while the others helped with dishes, she brushed past me in the hallway and murmured 4 words that froze my blood. "You need to stop." She didn't wait for my reaction. She just walked on, like it wasn't even up for discussion, like she'd already made peace with what came next. That night, I lay awake next to Andrew, staring into the dark, listening to the ceiling fan and his steady breathing. I reached for his hand under the sheets and held it like it might keep me anchored, but I was already drifting. I didn't text Jesse the next morning. I didn't answer his calls, but I didn't end it either. I just disappeared. Part of me hoped he'd take the silence as an answer. The other part hoped he wouldn't. For days, I lived like that, haunted by Marissa's voice, too scared to confess and too ashamed to keep pretending. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Guilt started curling around everything: my clothes, my car, the coffee pot, my husband's smile. And still, I said nothing. I wanted to believe I could fix it quietly, that if I stopped seeing Jesse, if I leaned back into my marriage, maybe no one else would get hurt. But guilt doesn't work that way. It doesn't sit still. It grows. It spills. And Marissa had already seen it leaking out of me. She hadn't called since that day. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. She was waiting for me to be brave or for the fallout, whichever came first. And deep down, I already knew which one it would be. In the days after the lunch, everything became sharper. Colors, sounds, silences. The air felt heavier, like I was constantly waiting for something to drop, for someone to say what we all now silently carried. I kept playing that moment over in my mind. Marissa's eyes, the way her voice cut through the air with those 4 words. You need to stop. I didn't answer Jesse's texts. I deleted the ones I hadn't opened yet, even though I already knew what they said. Are you okay? Was it something I did? Please talk to me. I couldn't bring myself to block him, but I also couldn't let his voice touch my world again. Not right now. Not while Marissa's silence rang louder than his questions. Andrew didn't notice the shift, at least not the one that mattered. He thought I was tired. He offered to make dinner that Tuesday and picked up Ty from the place down the street without even asking what I wanted. He remembered my favorite order, of course. He always did. We sat on the couch that night, bowls in our laps, a movie on. I don't remember what it was. I laughed when he did, even reached for his hand under the blanket at one point just to feel normal for a second. But my heart was somewhere else. It had been ever since that champagne toast. I kept waiting for Marissa to reach out, to text me, to call, to say something that would let me breathe. But she didn't, and her silence became something dangerous. It left space for shame to fester, for guilt to twist into paranoia. I started wondering what she might do. Would she tell Andrew? Would she drop it into a casual conversation when I wasn't around? Would she corner me again, but this time not with a whisper? I told myself I should talk to her first, get ahead of it, apologize, confess, beg. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready. Because I wasn't brave enough to face the look she had in her eyes that day. Because some part of me still thought I could patch my life back together without losing everything. Instead, I focused on performing. I made Andrew breakfast the following Saturday. Scrambled eggs and avocado toast, the kind of effort I hadn't shown in a while. He smiled, surprised but grateful, kissed my cheek and told me I was glowing. Glowing. God, if only he knew. That day we went for a walk downtown. Savannah was alive with tourists and late summer sun. The moss-draped oaks offered just enough shade to make the heat feel intentional, like something chosen. I held his hand the whole time. I laughed at his jokes. I acted like I was trying, and in a way, I was. But the truth sat in the hollow of my chest, like a stone I couldn't cough up. That night, I lay awake long after Andrew fell asleep. I turned over, picked up my phone, hovered over Jesse's contact. I didn't want to talk to him. I just wanted to see if he was still there, still waiting. I typed out a message. I can't do this anymore, but I didn't send it. I deleted it. Then I deleted his number altogether, and just like that, it was over. Not with words, not with closure, just silence. I wish I could say that brought me peace. It didn't. It just made the loneliness louder. I started avoiding family gatherings, told my mom I wasn't feeling well, told Nate I was swamped with work. When Marissa asked in the group chat if we were doing brunch the next Sunday, I said I had a migraine. She didn't respond. She just heart-reacted the message. That cold little heart felt like a death sentence. I knew what she was doing. She was watching, waiting to see if I'd come clean, waiting to see what kind of woman I really was underneath the polished version I showed the world. And I hated her for it. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. That week, I started journaling again. Something I hadn't done since college. I wrote about the guilt, the tension, the things I couldn't say out loud. And in the middle of one entry, I asked myself the question that had been clawing at me for days. Why did I cheat? It wasn't love. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even excitement. It was emptiness. It was the fear that I was becoming invisible in my own life. That I was someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's sister, but never just Elise. Jesse made me feel seen, not for who I pretended to be, but for the messy, restless, aching version I tried to hide. But being seen isn't the same as being safe, and now I wasn't either. I was exposed. One small push from Marissa away from everything unraveling, and still, I told no one, because the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to my sister now, and what she did with it, That was a clock ticking just outside my control. It had been 2 weeks since the lunch, and Marissa's silence was starting to scream. I thought that not hearing from her would bring relief, that if she hadn't said anything by now, maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd carry the secret with me out of some twisted form of sisterly loyalty, but the longer she stayed quiet, the more I felt the walls close in. Because silence, I was learning, isn't forgiveness, it's a warning. Andrew remained blissfully unaware. He kissed me on the forehead every morning, like he had since our first year of marriage. He talked about planning a weekend getaway for our anniversary in the fall, somewhere quiet, maybe Asheville or Charleston. He looked at me like I was still the woman he married. I couldn't look back at him the same way. Every time I saw his eyes, I saw Marissa's instead. Her expression that day at the table, her voice in the hallway, I had memorized it. You need to stop. But she hadn't meant just the affair. She meant the pretending, the cowardice, the way I had turned our whole family into a stage set, hiding behind every perfectly folded napkin and polite laugh. One morning, a package arrived at our door. I assumed it was something I had ordered and forgotten, candles maybe, or a new throw pillow. But when I opened it, I froze. It was a book, The Art of Transparency. What happens when we tell the truth? No note, no sender listed, but I didn't need one. I stared at it for nearly an hour, the title burning through my chest like a dare. Later that afternoon, I texted Marissa. Just one line. "Did you send the book?" She didn't reply. She just heart-reacted it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shoved the book in a drawer and buried my face in a pillow until the tears came. That night, over dinner, Andrew mentioned that Marissa had invited us to a fundraiser her firm was sponsoring the next weekend, some kind of local literacy event. "She said it'd be good for us to get out, see people," he said like it was nothing. I nearly dropped my fork. "She invited both of us?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, said there'll be music, wine, food trucks, the whole thing. Why? You don't want to go?" Number I didn't. Not because of the event, but because I knew what it was. A test. Marissa didn't want me to show up. She wanted to see if I could, and if I did, what version of myself I'd bring with me. "I'll think about it," I said, already feeling sick. That night, I dreamt I was standing in the middle of a crowd, wearing nothing but a bathrobe, holding a wine glass. Everyone around me laughed and clinked glasses, but I was barefoot. And Marissa stood on a stage above us all, holding a microphone. She wasn't speaking, just watching me. When I woke up, the sheets were damp with sweat. I started preparing for the fundraiser like it was a battle. I chose a dress carefully, understated but elegant, dark green with sleeves that made me feel covered but not hidden. I wore the earrings Andrew gave me last Christmas, hoping they'd remind me that I had once been someone he believed in. I even practiced my smile in the mirror. It looked like a scar. We arrived just before sunset. The park was strung with lights and full of people sipping rosé out of plastic cups. There were tables of books, lawn chairs, children running barefoot. It should have felt light, casual, safe. But the second I saw Marissa across the crowd, my stomach tightened. She wore a black jumpsuit and held a glass of red wine like it was part of her arm. Her expression was unreadable, calm, polite. But when her eyes found mine, I felt it again, that shift in the air, like pressure building before a storm. She made her way toward us slowly, greeting other guests along the way like nothing was wrong. When she finally reached us, she kissed Andrew on the cheek and hugged me with one arm, careful not to wrinkle her blouse. "You look great," she said flatly. "Thanks," I replied, barely breathing. Then she turned to Andrew and asked about his work, about the weekend getaway. He answered eagerly, unaware that I was standing there between them, drowning in dread. I kept waiting for her to slip, to drop something sharp into the conversation. But she didn't. She didn't need to, because I knew what this was. She wasn't going to destroy me. Not out loud. She was going to let me do it myself. Let me sweat through small talk. Let me laugh too loudly. Let me twist myself into knots just trying to seem normal. The night dragged on. At one point, I saw her standing with a woman I didn't know, whispering something. They both looked at me briefly. I froze. Were they talking about me? Was she telling her? Was the leak beginning? I told Andrew I wasn't feeling well and asked to leave early. He didn't question it, just thanked Marissa for the invitation and promised we'd see her again soon. I avoided her eyes as we walked away. Back home, I sat alone in the bathroom, still in my dress, mascara smudged just slightly. I looked at my reflection for a long time, searching for the woman I thought I was, but she was fading, washed out behind the guilt, the fear, the grief of a life I was slowly losing my grip on. And then I realized something that chilled me. Marissa wasn't trying to expose me. She was letting me rot in my own truth. And it was working. The fundraiser was a week ago, but I still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, even when I'm alone. I catch myself double-checking texts before I send them, locking my phone screen the moment Andrew enters a room, even though Jesse isn't messaging anymore. I've deleted every trace of him, pictures, call logs, every message thread, but my fingers still twitch some nights, muscle memory reaching for a ghost. There's this new silence in our house, like it's listening to me. The floors creak louder. The fridge hums more sharply. The coffee machine sputters in the mornings like it's judging me. I used to think guilt lived in your chest, but that's not true. Guilt lives in the walls. I don't know who I am anymore when I walk from one room to the next. Just a woman trying to remember how to be good, how to smile, how to breathe, without wondering if today's the day everything implodes. Marissa hasn't contacted me since the event. She doesn't have to. That's what makes it worse. Her restraint. It tells me she's in control, not just of the information, but of me. She's letting me unravel on my own schedule, and I can feel her waiting like a predator in tall grass. She doesn't want revenge. She wants truth, and I'm not sure I can give it. Andrew has started mentioning things that feel, off. A forgotten anniversary card I swore I had written. A voicemail he never got. A blouse I couldn't explain. He isn't accusing me of anything, not yet. But I can feel his questions forming behind his eyes. Yesterday, he asked casually, "Are you okay?" I said yes, too quickly. He tilted his head, watching me. "You just seem somewhere else lately." I shrugged. Work's been a lot. But I could feel the space widening between us, the kind you can't cross with affection or gestures or even 10 years of shared memory. It's the kind of space you fall into. That night, I dreamed of Marissa again. Only this time she wasn't standing on a stage. She was in our childhood bedroom, sitting on the edge of my bed, brushing her hair like she used to when we were 16. She turned to me and said, "You always thought if you smiled enough, people wouldn't see the truth." When I woke up, I could still feel the ache of her words like they'd been carved into my ribs. I tried to text her. Just a single word. Talk? She left it on read. That afternoon, I called my mother, under the pretense of checking in, asking how she was feeling, if the fig tree in the backyard had finally taken root. But I was fishing. I needed to know if Marissa had said anything. She hadn't, at least not to Mom. "Your sister's been quiet lately," she said, sipping tea on the other end of the line. "I think she's working too hard again. You two should spend some time together. It's been a while." I almost laughed. Together was the last place we should be. But I said I'd try. Later that evening, I drove. No destination, no music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and my heart pounding in my throat. I didn't want to go home, didn't want to sit across from Andrew and pretend we were still who we used to be. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and just sat there for 20 minutes, staring out at people pushing carts, loading groceries, answering phones, looking tired and ordinary and alive. I envied them. Because at least they looked like they still believed their lives made sense. When I got home, Andrew was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, humming under his breath like always. He looked up, smiled, and said, "I was about to call you. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, walking to him and pressing my lips to his cheek. Just needed to clear my head. It was true in a way. But clearing it didn't help. It only made the wreckage more visible. That night, I found the book again, the one Marissa sent anonymously, The Art of Transparency. I opened it for the first time. The first chapter was titled The Cost of Hiding. I didn't need to read further. I knew the cost already. It's in every breath I take now, in every moment of silence between Andrew and me, in every time I glance at my phone and remember there's no one left on the other side of it. I thought the hardest part of this would be the lie itself. the sneaking around, the guilt, the double life. But I was wrong. The hardest part is living afterward, in the wreckage, pretending you can still find a version of yourself in the pieces. And the longer I stay in it, the more I wonder, do I even deserve forgiveness? Or am I just stalling, waiting for someone else to do what I can't? End it? I woke up before Andrew that morning and just lay there, staring at the ceiling. The room was still gray with early light. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, the birds outside starting their rhythm. Everything was normal, familiar, unthreatening. And yet I felt like I was lying in a burning house, waiting for someone to smell the smoke. Andrew shifted beside me, still half asleep. He reached out instinctively, found my hand under the blanket, and squeezed it. It nearly broke me. Because he still trusted me. Because he still loved me. Because he didn't know. Later, over breakfast, I noticed him watching me. Not just in passing, but carefully, like he was trying to read a language I hadn't meant to speak out loud. I poured coffee too fast and spilled some on the counter. He grabbed a paper towel and wiped it, never breaking eye contact. "Everything okay?" he asked again. This time, I hesitated. It was only for a second, but it was enough. He saw it. "Is it work?" he continued, gentler now, reaching across the table. "Or us? United States?" I felt my stomach turn. I shook my head too quickly. "It's not us. It's just stress. I don't know. I feel off." He nodded like he believed me, or wanted to. But that pause, the way his brow furrowed, the way his hand lingered a second longer than usual, told me something had shifted. He was starting to suspect. Not the full truth, not yet, but something deeper than stress, something hollowed out inside me. The rest of the day passed in fragments. I worked, or pretended to. I answered emails I couldn't remember sending. I stared at spreadsheets and saw only static. I ignored texts from my mother, even one from Nate checking in about an upcoming family dinner. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't face them, especially not Marissa. By evening, I felt sick, not physically, but spiritually, like something inside me had spoiled. I took a long shower, long enough to fog the mirror, long enough to pretend I could wash it all off. When I got out, Andrew had lit a candle in the bedroom. He was sitting on the bed reading. "I was thinking," he said, not looking up, "maybe we should take that trip sooner, get away for a few days, somewhere quiet, just the two of us." My throat closed. He wanted to save us, and he had no idea I was the one sinking the boat. I nodded, forcing a smile. "That sounds nice." He reached for my hand again. So easy, so warm. And that's when it happened. He said, "You got a call earlier, from a Charlotte area code. I let it go to voicemail." Charlotte. That was Jesse's city. My skin went cold. "Oh?" I said, trying to sound curious, casual, anything but panicked. "Did they leave a message?" He shook his head. Number just hung up. I wanted to throw up. I knew Jesse wouldn't try to contact me again. He had more pride than that. But a missed call? From that area? Now? After weeks of silence? I could feel the noose tightening. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at my phone, half expecting a new message to appear. But nothing came. No call, no text, just silence. The next day, I called Marissa. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail, something I hadn't done in years. "Hey, I need to talk. Please, just call me back." I didn't say what it was about. She didn't call back. By the time Andrew came home that night, I was unraveling again. He stepped inside, kissed my cheek, asked how my day was. I told him it was fine, but then he paused. "I saw you called Marissa," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Everything okay between you two?" That question cracked something open inside me. I opened my mouth to say yes, but nothing came out. Because it wasn't okay. Nothing was, and I was starting to think it never would be again. By the end of that week, I stopped pretending I was okay. Not publicly, of course, not at work or at the grocery store or even with my mother when she called to remind me about my cousin's baby shower. I nodded at the right moments, responded with vague warmth, and said I was just tired. Everyone believes that word. It's the perfect lie. But inside the house, inside myself, the act was slipping. Andrew noticed. He didn't press, not yet, but he moved through the space between us more carefully now. His kisses felt more like checkpoints. His eyes lingered longer, trying to read what I wasn't saying. I kept thinking about that missed call from Charlotte, whether it had been a mistake or something deliberate, whether Jesse had broken the silence because he missed me or because he was unraveling too. But it wasn't just Jesse I couldn't stop thinking about. It was Marissa. She hadn't called me back, not even a text, just nothing. A silence so sharp it echoed. It didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like strategy. She was giving me space to tell the truth, and I wasn't. One morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual. My face looked different now, more hollow around the eyes, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. My wedding ring felt heavier on my finger. My reflection looked like someone who had wandered too far from who she used to be and wasn't sure how to get back. I wanted to confess, not just to end the fear, but to end the weight. But how do you tell someone you love that you've betrayed them repeatedly and deliberately? That the life you built together was something you stepped outside of, willingly, without warning? You can't ease into that. You detonate it. That night, Andrew cooked dinner again. Steak and roasted potatoes, a meal we used to save for special occasions. He was trying, in his way. I sat across from him and watched the candlelight catch in his eyes, and I wanted so badly to reach for his hand and tell him the truth. Instead, I said, "This is really good." He smiled. "I wanted to do something nice. You've been distant lately. I thought maybe we could reset a little." Reset. If only it were that easy. He poured wine into my glass. I didn't touch it. He took a sip of his and set the glass down. "Elise, can I ask you something?" I looked up. "Of course." His voice was gentle, but there was something behind it, an edge, a hesitation. "Are you happy with us?" The question stunned me, not because he asked it, but because I realized I hadn't asked myself that in months. I swallowed. I don't know. There it was. Not the whole truth, but a crack in the wall. Andrew leaned back slightly, nodding slowly, like he'd been bracing for that answer. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "Okay, just that. Okay," like he didn't want to push, like he already knew there was more. After dinner, I went for a walk. The sun had set, and the air smelled like grass and heat and something faintly burnt in the distance. I walked in circles around the block, arms folded tight across my chest. And then, I saw her, Marissa. She was sitting on the hood of her car, parked a few houses down. She wasn't looking at me, just staring ahead, arms crossed, like she'd been waiting. I didn't know whether to approach her or run. I took a step toward her and she turned her head. Our eyes met. She didn't wave, didn't move. I froze. Then she started the engine and drove away. No words, no confrontation, just the cold certainty that she had been watching, and that whatever came next was mine to decide. I didn't tell Andrew that I saw Marissa. I didn't tell him she'd been parked on our street, sitting alone in her car like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't say how long I stood there after she drove away, knees locked, heart pounding, skin buzzing with panic. I just walked back into the house, kicked off my shoes, and said I was tired. That word again, the one I used when I meant I'm unraveling. The next morning, I found her book again, The Art of Transparency, still buried in my nightstand, spine uncreased, as untouched as the truth itself. I pulled it out and laid it on my lap like a confession. I stared at the cover, wondering if she chose it because of the title or because she knew it would haunt me. I opened it again. Inside the front cover, in handwriting I recognized instantly, was a note. "You don't have to say it, but you have to stop pretending. M." My chest tightened. I didn't remember seeing the note the first time, or maybe I hadn't been ready to read it. Maybe now I was. I closed the book slowly and stared at the wall. That evening, Andrew brought up the trip again. "Let's book something," he said. "Just a few nights away. We could use the quiet." I nodded. Okay. But the truth was, I couldn't imagine being alone with him. Not like that. Not in some beautiful cabin or beachside inn where we'd be expected to reconnect, to share laughter and wine and soft mornings. I couldn't pretend that much. I wasn't just hiding from him anymore. I was hiding from myself. The next day, Marissa sent me a text. No words, just a picture. It was from the fundraiser, me standing alone near a booth, holding a plastic cup of wine, eyes cast down, face tense. She must have taken it from across the lawn. I looked like someone waiting for her world to end. Beneath the photo, she wrote, "You don't look like someone who's done healing. You look like someone who's done hiding." I sat on the bathroom floor and cried. I cried like something inside me had finally split open. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood what she meant. She wasn't going to out me. She wasn't going to force me to come clean. This wasn't blackmail. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. She was holding it up again and again, waiting for me to look into it. And now I had. The next morning, I made coffee for Andrew and brought it to him in bed, like I used to. He smiled, surprised, kissed my wrist as he took the mug. "You're up early," he said. I nodded. "I've been thinking," I began slowly, "about us." His expression shifted, tentative, cautious. "I've made mistakes," I said, my voice barely steady. "Not just recently. For a while. I've been somewhere else." He didn't speak. He just listened. I could see his throat move as he swallowed. "I don't want to lie anymore," I continued, "even if I haven't told you everything yet. I want to be honest, starting now." A long silence stretched between us. Then he asked carefully, "Is there something I need to know?" I stared at him. I felt my mouth open, and then I closed it. "Not yet, not now, just this step." "For now," I said, "just that I'm ready to stop pretending." He nodded slowly. "That's a start." We sat like that, in the quiet, the coffee cooling between us. No answers, no confrontation, but something had shifted. A door cracked open. I didn't know yet if I'd walk through it with him, or alone. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt still. The calm didn't last. For a few days, things between Andrew and me settled into a strange, fragile peace. We moved gently around each other like people recovering from a fight that hadn't been fought yet. He didn't push, I didn't run. We shared dinners, small jokes, and quiet evenings filled with tension so soft it almost felt like care. But I could feel the clock ticking. I think he could too. I wasn't ready to tell him the full truth, not yet, but the space between what I said and what I held inside was shrinking fast. I had cracked the door open, but the storm behind it hadn't passed. It was gathering. And Marissa. She hadn't said anything since the photo. I thought she might follow up, press in, corner me again. But she didn't. Instead, I saw her name appear on my phone one afternoon in a group chat with Nate and our mom. Just a simple message about our cousin's baby shower. "I'll bring fruit salad. Elise, want to ride with me?" I stared at it for 10 minutes. It was bait, but not the cruel kind. It was her way of asking, "Are you ready?" without saying it. I replied, "Sure." The day of the shower was hot and blinding. I wore a floral dress I hadn't touched in a year, one that made me feel softer, younger. I waited for Marissa in my driveway, purse clutched in my hands like armor. When she pulled up, I got in without a word. We drove for a while in silence. The windows were halfway down. The air was thick with that southern scent of cut grass and warmed pavement. Finally, she spoke. "You told him anything yet?" Her voice wasn't sharp, just tired, measured. I didn't answer right away. Then, "I started to." She nodded. "Good." Another long silence. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I'm not going to tell him, Elise." I looked at her, startled. She kept her eyes on the road. "I thought I might, at first, but I realized it's not mine to tell. It never was." I felt tears sting the back of my eyes. "Why not?" "Because if I tell him, you're the victim. You get to cry, apologize, rebuild. But if you tell him, you're the one facing it. That's what matters." We didn't speak the rest of the ride. The baby shower was filled with polite smiles and pastel decorations, and women pretending not to be exhausted. I drifted through it in a daze, my ears ringing from Marissa's words. They weren't cruel, they were exact. She wasn't waiting for me to fall. She was waiting for me to rise. That night, back home, Andrew and I sat on the porch as the sky turned from gold to indigo. He had a beer in his hand. I had nothing. My stomach couldn't hold it. He looked over at me, his face calm, too calm. "Elise?" he said softly. "What happened in Charlotte?" I felt the world tilt. "What?" I breathed. "That call," he said. "It wasn't spam. I checked the number. It's Jesse, isn't it?" Time slowed. My heart punched against my ribs. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I didn't speak. He set his beer down gently and turned toward me fully. "I've been watching you pull away for months. I thought it was work, stress, maybe us just growing apart, but that call, it connected things." I swallowed, the air thick as honey. "I didn't want to know," he said. "I still don't, but I can't keep pretending this is normal." He waited for the truth, for the version I hadn't yet given him, and I almost gave it right there on that porch, under a sky that didn't care, but I didn't. I just whispered, "I'm sorry." And he looked away. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that breaks foundations. Truth had hovered at the edge of our lives for so long, I thought it would remain distant forever. But one evening on the porch, under a sky turning from lavender to deep navy, it found me. Andrew asked about Charlotte, the missed call, the city code, and everything shifted. I could see in his eyes he had put pieces together. I could feel him teetering between love and suspicion. I realized then that silence wasn't mercy. It was cruelty, prolonged, intentional, rooted in fear. I wanted to confess there, everything, but the words got trapped behind my teeth. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry," and felt a fragment of our world splinter. He didn't respond. He sipped his beer, stared into the sometimes silver line of the horizon, and didn't say a word. That silence spoke volumes. I went inside afterward, feeling exposed. The warm glow of the living room overhead light burned my skin. I didn't know how to hold what I felt without spilling something I wasn't ready to say. Later that night, I stared at my journal, lines of careful pen marks layered with guilt, confusion, grief. I had written, "Why did I cheat?" in bold letters weeks ago. But tonight, I wrote something else. "Can I still be Elise?" I didn't know the answer. The next morning, I woke early. Andrew was already gone. I found a note on the kitchen table. "I'll be back this afternoon. We need to talk." No signature. But I knew it was from him. My heart felt empty. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made coffee and sat at the table. Silence felt sacred and suffocating at once. I decided I had to face Marissa the way she had faced me, with honesty, not deflection. I opened her note again inside the book she sent. "You don't have to say it, but you have to stop pretending." I closed the book and called her number. She didn't pick up. Then I texted, "We need to talk. Can we meet?" No reply for hours. The pause felt colder than a confrontation. Finally, she texted back, "Coffee?" "The bakery on Ridge, 3 p.m. I breathed. When I arrived, Marissa was already there, sitting at an outside table. The place was quiet, only a couple of early visitors. The morning sun shone through the canopy of oaks overhead, but nothing seemed alive. She didn't smile when we sat. She just waited. I took a breath and I started, "I'm sorry." I didn't qualify that apology. I didn't add disclaimers. I didn't say, "for everything." I just said it. She nodded. Then I told her I had to confess properly, not to spare myself, but because I wanted to try being someone whose promise held weight. I told her how I saw her parked down the street, how I found the book with her handwriting, how the photo shook me. She listened, carefully, unflinchingly. She reached across the table and laid her hand on mine, not touching, just hovering. "When you're ready to say the rest, I'll listen," she said. "But don't expect forgiveness on my timeline." It wasn't a demand, it was a boundary. Her words freed me. That afternoon with Andrew was the hardest confrontation I had ever faced. He guided me to the living room, sat me down, and asked me again, "Do you want to save this?" I closed my eyes. thinking of that long stretch of porcelain china at my mother's house, that toast I never deserved, that voice that whispered, "You need to stop." I nodded. Then I laid it out. All of it. How I met Jesse at the conference, how I fell into it, how I made excuses, how he made me feel alive in ways I thought I lost. I confessed how it lasted 6 months, half of them with phone calls, weekends, false pretexts. I said his name. I apologized to Andrew, to our marriage, to the idea of us. He listened, stone-faced, while I turned my shame inside out. When I finished, I waited. I expected fury, tears, violence. I didn't know what. Instead, he sat silent. Then he stood, walked to the window, staring outside. The hush of the living room was sudden and absolute. Finally, he looked back. "I didn't want you to hate me," I said quietly. He shook his head. "I don't hate you. You hurt me, deeply. But hatred? It's not something you feel when the person you married still matters." For a moment, grief and relief collided in me. He walked over and sat beside me. I braced for the worst, an embrace or a shove. Then his hand settled on mine. "I don't know what happens now," he said. "But I'm willing to try, to figure that out if you want me to." My chest trembled. I saw him not as a victim or judge, but as someone fragile and hopeful, balancing on fear and love. In the days that followed, therapy started. I found a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma and infidelity recovery. Andrew agreed to attend with me once, then stepped back when I asked. He didn't want to control the process. He just said he wanted it to happen. Marissa stayed out of our daily negotiation, but once she sent a message. "Take care of yourself, Elise." That was all. Ridiculously gentle, affectionate, still withholding, but softer. I began to journal again, but not with guilt. Now I wrote lists. Apologies, I'd say again. Mistakes I don't rewrite, but learn from. What Elise wants next. Words I had evicted from myself. Forgiveness, clarity, perhaps even peace. I started speaking with friends I'd shut out. Quiet, loving people who asked how I was without judgment. Their voices reminded me how good laughter can feel, how safe company feels. I saw Andrew more intentionally, not hiding in the haze between us, but holding it in breathless truths, in apologies, in small shared tasks. I cooked meals without performance. I kissed him without calculation. I grieved for the marriage I almost destroyed, and also gratitude that it hadn't ended before it really began healing. And I realized something. Confession wasn't just for him. It was for me. It allowed me to find the edges of my own conscience, to walk into a room of truth and maybe learn how to stay there. As we moved into chapter 10 of our lives, nothing was neatly solved. Our marriage wasn't healed. I had fractured it, but truth had cleared the air. I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror one morning, softer around the edges, but quieter, steadier. Elise again, not someone buried under lies. In the end, I learned that confession doesn't erase guilt. It transforms it. It makes it visible. It gives it shape so you can hold it or leave it behind. Nothing was clean, but cleaned doesn't mean perfect. There's no moment when forgiveness suddenly arrives, no sign or thunderclap. It doesn't come like that, not real forgiveness. It creeps in slowly over weeks and small moments, like sunlight finding its way through cracked blinds. You notice it when you realize you've gone an hour without thinking of what you did, then maybe a whole morning, then a day. But it never fully leaves, and maybe it shouldn't. After the night I told Andrew the truth, everything felt quieter. Not peaceful, just quieter, like the air around us had thickened. We moved gently, we touched less, talked carefully. But there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. Not love, not trust, something between the two, willingness. We started therapy, not together at first, separate. I needed space to unravel, to hear my own thoughts spoken aloud. My counselor asked questions that pulled the floor out from under me. When did you start disappearing from your own life? Did you love Jesse, or did you love the version of yourself he saw? Those questions kept me up at night. I realized that what Jesse offered me wasn't passion, it was escape. I didn't love him. I loved being wanted by someone who hadn't watched me lose pieces of myself over the years. He didn't see the days I shut down, or the weeks I gave more to everyone but myself. He just saw what I let him see. and with Andrew, I had stopped showing up. That was my real betrayal. Not just the affair, but the silence I let grow between us long before Jesse ever walked back into my life. It's strange, the way healing begins. Not in grand apologies or sudden reconciliations, but in the smallest gestures. Andrew started making coffee again, just how I liked it. He didn't say anything about it, just placed the mug beside me one morning while I read a book, then walked away. Another day, he sent me a photo of a place we had once stayed during our 3rd anniversary. No message. Just the image. I replied with a heart. We weren't rebuilding the old version of our marriage. That one had already burned. What we were doing now was different. Tentative. Honest. Almost raw. There were still moments when we'd sit across the table and not know what to say, but at least we were showing up. Fully. No more pretending. One morning, I told him about the day Marissa sent me the photo, the one from the fundraiser. I explained what she said in the message. I expected him to be angry, at her, at me, at all of it. Instead, he just said, she was protecting me in her own way. And in that moment, I loved him more than I had in a long time. Not because he forgave me, but because he was willing to make space for the complexity of it all, because he didn't need to make anyone a villain to hold me accountable. Marissa and I met for lunch 2 weeks later. Not planned, just happened. She called out of the blue. Her voice was lighter, less defensive. We sat on the patio of a little cafe downtown. It was humid, cicadas buzzing, condensation dripping down glasses of iced tea. She looked at me for a long moment and then said, "You look less haunted." I smiled, almost despite myself. "I feel less haunted." She nodded. Then, after a pause, she said, "I'm not mad anymore." Tears hit my eyes before I could stop them. She reached for my hand, held it. "You did a terrible thing, but you're not a terrible person. You just forgot who you were for a while." I whispered, "I think I'm still remembering." Marissa smiled gently. "Good. She was always my favorite." My relationship with Andrew didn't go back to the way it was. It couldn't. That marriage, the one built on assumptions and routine and quiet desperation, was gone. But something new began in its place. We talked more. Not just about logistics or plans, but about feelings, fears, memories we hadn't shared in years. He admitted that long before Jesse, he'd felt me slipping away, that he didn't know how to reach me anymore, and that he blamed himself for not trying harder. I told him the truth. It wasn't his fault. I had shut down long before I stepped out. I didn't ask for help. I didn't say what I needed. I just disappeared behind a smile. We agreed to keep going. One step at a time. We started walking together in the evenings, just a mile or two. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. But we walked, side by side, in motion, present. And somehow, that was enough. Jesse never called again, not once. He became what he always was, temporary, a symptom of something deeper, a mirror I used to see the parts of me I didn't want to face. I don't hate him. I don't miss him either. He served his purpose. Painful, necessary, brief. Months passed. Slowly, then all at once. Fall crept in. Then winter. Then a new spring. I found myself smiling more, not because everything was perfect, but because I no longer felt like a stranger in my own life. I had chosen truth, and truth, though it came with loss, also brought relief. I no longer flinched when Andrew walked into the room. I no longer looked for Marissa's judgment in every shadow. I had faced myself, and I was still here. Now I sit on our porch, coffee in hand, as the morning light spills across the floorboards. The air smells like jasmine and toast. Andrew is inside, humming as he folds laundry. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't pretend to, but I know this. I am not the same woman who walked into that family lunch months ago with a secret sitting heavy in her chest. I am not the same woman who flinched at a photo, or a missed call, or a whispered warning. I am someone new, someone truer. And maybe that's the most any of us can hope for. Not perfection, but transformation. If this story meant something to you, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. Be kind to yourself. We're all carrying something. Until next time.